What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Accelerate Your Life podcast. As always, I'm your host, Mallory Marks. We've got a little bit of a unique episode today. This episode is actually going to be a recording from a masterclass or webinar, if you want to call it that, that we did this last week for our community. It was completely free to join. We're going to do them again in the future. So make sure you stay tuned to see when we do these again. You can sign up. It's 100% free. It's always going to be free to anybody. But this masterclass, this first one, we called it the Nutrition Blueprint Masterclass. And really, we just want it to be the bare bones basics of nutrition, the fundamentals that we are not taught. We are not taught growing up. I think what I really focused on in the masterclass too was that I think the first times we're ever taught about nutrition, and really the only lens of which we're taught nutrition through as a young adult and growing up, is through a lens of dieting and what it means to be like trying to look at calories from a low perspective and losing weight. And we're never actually taught how to eat. And this is why I think people are so confused with where do I even start? How do I eat? What's the right thing? How do I build a plate? How do I know how much to eat? I just get questions all the time about I don't even know what nutrition is supposed to look like. So the goal of this masterclass was to be the first step in beginning to understand that. So we go through talking about calories, macros, understanding the difference, understanding each macronutrient, why you need them, why they're important, how much you need. We talk about how to build a plate, why you're building the plate the way that you are, why we're focused on, when it comes to blood sugar regulation and why that's important and what's going on there. And then we finish up talking about metabolism and understanding more about how that works, how to make it faster, what makes people think that their metabolism is broken. So much good information chalk into this. It's about 40 minutes of presenting, and then we do some Q&A at the end. So I hope you guys enjoy. I want to make this accessible for everybody. So without further ado, here is the Nutrition Blueprint Masterclass. All right, well, welcome everybody to the Nutrition Blueprint Masterclass. We'll preface this by saying this is the first masterclass webinar we've done in almost 2 years. So it's been a while, but it is something we would like to do more. We're thinking maybe quarterly. So what I would love from you guys is feedback on what you think, how this goes, things you like about it, things you would like to see be different, and also other topics, because this one is going to be just focused kind of on starting of what we felt like was the basics when it comes to your health and fitness journey, understanding the foundations of nutrition. But obviously there's so much to it. There's so many things we could continuously talk on. So if there's ever any topics you guys want to see, please let me know. We don't have a survey or anything going out after this, but like I said, the email with the recording will be going out. You can feel free to reply to that. That's going to go directly to my email. I probably will be reaching out in the Instagram DMs, asking you guys, how it was, etc. So please feel free to be honest, leave any feedback, all that good stuff. So without further ado, though, we're going to dive into the Nutrition Blueprint Masterclass. All right. One thing that is kind of inspired this masterclass is actually Coach Megan said to me a few weeks ago, she's heard this on before and it really resonated with me too, is that we have always been taught how to diet. We've never really been taught how to eat. And when she said this, I was like, that's so true. Growing up, I think that all the knowledge we had around nutrition and when food was talked about in our lives, especially I feel like as women, it was always through a lens of trying to stay small, right? Trying to lose weight and just dieting and what it meant to try to make sure you were doing things the right way to stay a certain size, to look a certain way, etc. But one thing that I really realized when I started my own health and fitness journey is that we're not meant to be dieting all the time. It's okay to, sorry, I'm going to put someone on mute. Okay. It's okay to go through short phases where you're maybe in an intentional fat loss phase, you are trying to lose a little bit of weight, or maybe you do need to lose some weight to be healthier. It's okay to have those periods of time. We are not always supposed to be in a calorie deficit. We are just not. In fact, the majority of our life, we should be at maintenance. And so it's time to change our understanding around food and realize that we're not always meant to be trying to be smaller, and we need to learn what it means to eat to fuel ourselves, not just to be smaller. So that's kind of the inspiration behind this presentation. Now, again, doesn't mean that it's not okay to go through diet phases. And some of the things you're going to get from here is you're going to understand what it means to be in a healthy calorie deficit and how to be able to manipulate your nutrition to get to the goal you want to be. But I think we've always only looked at it through one lens and just not the perspective of eating to fuel ourselves, to be the best version of ourselves and to be the healthiest version. Oh, not backwards. Okay, so I meant to put I just went through this practice so many times and I was like, go back and put this, and I forgot. I meant to put a little table of contents here, but I'll just go ahead and speak it. So there's kind of going to be three sections to this presentation. The first is I'm going to go over calories, macros, the basics of that, understanding really what they mean, the difference between the two, and the macronutrients that that exist and how we want to prioritize them. And then Megan's going to talk about how to build a balanced meal, even if you're not tracking calories and macros, just to understand what it means to build a balanced plate. That's a question we get all the time, is don't know how to build a plate. So that's going to be from the perspective of fueling yourselves properly, not having to measure things, but understanding. She'll even go a little bit more in depth of understanding like why we build that plate that way and how it affects blood sugar and all of that. And then I'll finish up by talking about the basics and understanding of metabolism and how to influence our metabolism. Because that's really I think, thing most of us want to understand is like, how do we, if we feel like we have a slow metabolism, why is that? How do we fix that? And how do we optimize things to, again, just be able to be the healthiest selves, feel and look the way we want. So that's going to be the bones of this. So getting in and starting with calories. What is a calorie? Let's start there. I know some of you guys might be like, okay, I know what that is. We can skip this. But I want to challenge us to change the way we look at this word. Okay, because literally, the literal definition of a calorie is the amount of energy required to raise the temperature of 1 kilogram of water by 1 degree Celsius. Probably doesn't really mean a lot to any of you guys, because that's not really what we're looking at the lens of the word calorie through. But what I really want you to take away from this definition is that calorie is energy. And in the literal scientific way, where it gets its from is it's the energy required to raise the temperature of water, but it's energy, right? So the relevant definition when we're looking at it through the lens of nutrition is it's the energy value of food. Now, I want to emphasize, and what I want a big takeaway of this masterclass today to be, is that calorie is not a dirty word. It's not a negative word. It's just a neutral word. It's energy, right? It's the energy value of food. And I think that over time and the way, diet culture has shown up in our lives, growing up, we've attached a lot of negativity to this word because of our culture's overconsumption and miseducation around food, which then leads to things like obesity, health complications, not feeling great, etc. And yes, that can come from overconsumption of calories, but it's not calories itself that are the problem. And I think, again, we kind of fear, like, I don't want to eat too much of them. I don't like, it just has this negative connotation, but today that's going to change. Okay. The goal from this presentation is I want you to leave with neutrality around calorie, food. It is simply energy. Okay. And why do we need them? Got this definition from the National Honor Society. Why are calories important? You need the energy from calories for your body to work properly. Your body uses this energy to function, okay, for all sorts of tasks, but some tasks including breathing, pumping blood, repairing cells, digestion, brain function, immune system, building muscle. Most, if not all of these are things that literally keep us alive. So this is needed, and it's not just needed, it's needed to the adequate amount. So the last thing I kind of want to emphasize here before we go further is understanding how many calories we need. And I'm about to throw up several different RDAs, which stands for recommended dietary allowance, of calories for different age groups. I have women and men up here. I'll just read through the women's. I think we have mostly women on here. But you're going to see that, yes, it changes a little bit with age range, but I think you're going to be maybe surprised by what the recommended dietary allowance or need for your body to work properly is for these different age ranges. For a 2 to 3-year-old toddler, the recommended dietary allowance is 1,000 to 1,400 calories. I think we all have had this magical 1,200 calorie number in our brain, have heard it many, many times. And for some reason, I don't know when and where, it somehow became that's the number that you do no matter how tall you are, no matter what you weigh, no matter what your goal is. If you're trying to lose weight, that's the number you go to. And I want this to shed light on the fact that that's just, I don't know where that arbitrary number came from, but that's the amount that a 2 to 3-year-old toddler needs. Okay. These age groups here yes, they span and it begins to decrease a little bit as the age gets older, but the average here for women 19 to 60 plus is around 2,000 calories needed for your body to function and work properly. Caveat here, asterisk here, is that everybody is truly different, and these will change and vary based on obviously your age range, but also your activity level, your current weight, your metabolic history, which we'll hear later in the presentation, how you can change your metabolism based on your history of dieting. So this isn't an exact amount for everybody, but at least shows you, and I hope it paints a picture that we probably need more than we think, and getting away from this the less is better and this negativity around the word calorie is, again, what I want to accomplish today. All right. Next, understanding macros, and then understanding macros versus calories. Okay. Well, what is a macronutrient and what's the difference? Okay. Calories come from macronutrients, and macronutrients they're the nutrients that you need in the largest quantities. That's why we have the word macro in front of it. Micronutrients, for example, vitamins, they're still very, very important and needed. You just need them in smaller doses. So like, milligrams versus grams. It's just the actual literal amount. But your macronutrients are your protein, carbs, and fats. And then your calories come from each of these. So protein has 4 calories per gram. So like a gram of protein, like again, it's kind of pointing to where we're trying to figure
Okay, you got to come.
someone, sorry. Um, it's essentially like the more dialed in, like where are these calories coming from and how are they being used in the body? Because protein is going to be used differently in the body than carbs. Carbs are going to be used differently in the body than fats. So those calories, each of these have a calorie value, and those calories are being used in a different way. So protein has 4 calories per gram, carbs has 4 calories per gram, fats has 9 calories per gram. So when we get to thinking of like, should you track calories and macros? One thing I want to emphasize that I don't think is clear to a lot of people often and took me a while to understand is if you are tracking macronutrients, you are tracking calories because again, they have a caloric value. It's just kind of the next specific, it's like the next level, right? It's being more specific with where those calories are coming from. So calories control really only weight loss and weight gain. Tracking macronutrients controls more of the type of weight loss or weight gain. We have to remember fat and muscle have weight, right? And if we're just looking at calories and let's say let's say we have two people. Person A is in a calorie deficit. Let's say that it's 1,500 calories for that person. They're not caring about where the macros are coming from, and maybe they're not eating in that much protein then. Person B, who's same exact calorie deficit, 1,500 calories, but they're keeping protein very high, person A is probably going to lose more muscle than person B because the macronutrient and where those calories are coming from has more of an influence on body composition and which kind of tissue is being lost or gained. You can look at the opposite perspective too. If somebody's eating in a little bit of a surplus and one of them is not caring about macronutrients, maybe not eating that much protein, they're likely going to gain more fat, whereas somebody who is eating the same amount of calories but having more protein, and I do have to add in strength training and sending that signal, probably that weight they are going to gain is going to be muscle. So it dictates more of the type of weight gain we are losing or gaining. Type of weight we are losing or gaining. So biggest takeaway, overall body composition is influenced by the macronutrients that you are consuming. I do have to put a caveat here is also in addition to the type of exercise you're doing, that's a signal that also needs to be paired. But overall answer to this is I don't want to say that like you should track macros because for some people calories is an easier barrier to entry and it's much better than anything else. But if the more you want to be dialed into the type of weight you are trying to lose or gain, that's where we might want to take things to that next level. Okay, why are we going backwards when I click? All right. And then lastly, I'm going to speed through this one a little bit so Megan can get to her section, but we're going to meet those macros a little bit more and just better understand a little bit more what protein does, what carbs do, what fat do, why they're each important, and why you need all of them, and why we want to take a little bit of a deeper look at making sure that these are all in our diet. Protein. This is the building block of the body. This builds and maintains lean muscle, cells, bones, hair, nails, enzymes for function, and your hormones. It's the last pick that your body wants to use for energy. It's very hard for your body to turn protein into an energy source. It can do it. It does it by breaking down muscle. Not ideal. And it will do it if you don't have the next macro that we were talking about, but it's very difficult for it to do. It has 4 calories per gram, like we talked about. And this is a fun fact. It takes the most energy to digest, meaning that you actually burn more calories when you are digesting protein. So you don't absorb as many calories from protein. And this is why that somebody who's eating a high protein diet might lose weight or not gain as much weight as somebody who's eating the same amount of calories, but it's not high protein. And it influences body composition the most of any of the macros. It has the most impact on building muscle, maintaining muscle. And then the recommended amount is about 1 gram per pound of lean body weight or ideal body weight. I like to emphasize that because if you're somebody who maybe is a little bit more overweight, putting it to your pound of body weight might be a lot of protein. So more like ideal body weight. Carbs. All right, this is the primary source of energy for the body. And if the body doesn't have carbs to use as readily available for energy, it will go revert to breaking down muscle in order to use protein. It doesn't want to do it. We don't want it to do it either, but it will. So this is why we want to have carbs. Carbs have 4 calories per gram, so they're the same amount of caloric value as protein. Carbs are converted into glucose when consumed, and then this can either be used immediately as energy. So if you are eating, something like a simple sugar like fruit or even candy right before a workout, that's going to be the energy your body uses when you go into that workout because it's readily available. But if you don't go do something active and use that energy right away, then it's going to be stored as glycogen. Glycogen is just the storage form of glucose for later. This isn't necessarily a bad thing unless we are over consuming, and that's where glycogen, everything begins to be stored as fat. But it's just going to be stored as glycogen. Now, glycogen takes its friend water to come store with it. And this is why if you eat carbs, and you might see the scale go up a couple pounds that night or the next day because you're holding water with that glycogen that you're storing. It's not fat, it's going to go away. It's just that's something that I think a lot of people freak out. And this is why carbs are demonized. So like, oh my gosh, it made me gain weight. But unless you just overconsumed for a long period of time, it's just the water that it's holding with it. Another thing to note is that some systems in the body only run on glucose or carbs, essentially. So carbs are important. For example, your nervous system and brain function only operate on glucose. This is why if you have done keto or you have just been very low carb for a period of time, you might go through that period where you're experiencing brain fog. Your brain doesn't have the glucose it needs. The recommended daily amount for carbs for optimal function is 130 grams per day minimum. 130 grams. That's probably more than a lot of people think. And then lastly, fats. So fats are meant to support the metabolism, cell signaling, immunity, nutrient absorption, and then hormone production. I have this underlined because especially I know it's majority of women on here. Healthy dietary fats are extremely important for your body's ability to build hormones, signal hormones. And this is why people, even if they're eating adequate calories, if they're eating a low fat diet, they may lose their menstrual cycle because we don't have the adequate fats that we need to keep things operating the way they need. So they're very important, especially to women. Very careful with our clients that like there's certain thresholds of fats like we're just not going to drop below because they are essential. Also, last fun fact I didn't put on here: protein and fats are essential to life. Like you will die if you don't have them. So we need them. And then fat soluble vitamins are not digested without fat. So that's vitamin E, A, D, K. You must have dietary fat in your diet for these vitamins to be used in your body. And again, this is why we may see these deficiencies in people who are eating a low fat diet. Really fun fact, this was so cool to me when I learned this. Nature is really smart. Whole foods are really smart. This is why a lot of whole foods that are fat sources, like an avocado, they're also chock full of these vitamins because nature paired them together because you need the healthy fats for these vitamins to be used. Fats have 9 calories per gram, so they are the densest macronutrient. So that's why they're going to be probably the lowest in amount of grams that we consume, but still important. And they're more difficult for the body to use as fuel, but it will if it needs to, if it doesn't have enough carbs. For most people, most women, 50 to 70 grams of fat per day is a good-ish range, but taking like 25 to 30% of your calories is also a good way to look at it too. All right, last thing to wrap up that little section is that I want to emphasize fats do not make you fat. Carbs do not make you fat. Overconsumption of calories do, okay? Do not overconsume any macronutrient, even protein. We highlight protein. Protein is king. It's great. But if we overconsume it to us putting in a large calorie surplus, it's still going to gain fat. None of them are bad. They're all neutral. We just create the problem when we overconsume or underconsume. All right. That's our little section on calories and macros. I'll let Megan dive in. Also, I will be behind the scenes if it looks like I'm doing something. I should have said this at the beginning, but I'm going to be seeing like who all is here and working on the free coaching giveaway and who we're going to pick while Megan's talking. So anyway, without further ado, Megan.
Cool. Hey guys, I am Megan. I am our team's registered dietitian, head coach. Also have some other lovely certifications. I am a certified lactation counselor. I am a pregnancy and postpartum core rehabilitation specialist. I am also gut and hormone certified. So lots of education behind what I do. But we will get diving in. We're doing pretty much a blood sugar balancing. I know insulin resistance is a really hot topic right now. So I felt like it was really important for us to kind of cover the methodology behind it and everything like that. So let's talk about it. So insulin, and pretty much the opposite of that is blood sugar and glucose. So basics of blood sugar. So insulin and glucagon are two pretty much opposites of a teeter-totter that help maintain glucose homeostasis. So Obviously, there is a range of factors that include insulin resistance, diabetes, unbalanced diet that can cause blood sugars to spike or plummet. So, kind of each of these have a really important role. So, insulin pretty much brings down their blood sugar when it is too high. So, when it goes over X threshold, your insulin receptors will say, hey, we need to produce stuff so we can bring it down. Glucagon, when your blood sugar drops too low, because that does happen in the middle of the night, our blood sugar does drop because typically in the middle of the night, even if we're not technically fasting, we're typically not eating for a good 8 to 12 hours. So when glucagon is activated, when a blood sugar drops so low to help bring blood sugar back up. That's also why if you have any friends who have diabetes or anything like that, if you have the diabetic alert dogs, their systems and processes don't work right, so the glucagon isn't ever triggered. So that they have opposite other obviously other sim or systems in place to make sure that their blood sugars don't go too low. And then also the third hormone I really like to kind of bring into this is ghrelin. Ghrelin is your hunger hormone. I don't know if you ever have had a muffin for breakfast in the morning. You ever had a muffin or a plain bagel by itself for breakfast in the morning, and you notice you are more hungry like an hour and a half, 2 hours after you eat? This is our friend ghrelin. So this is also triggers when our blood sugars get too low, which usually when we have a very carb-based meal, our blood sugars will spike really fast and they'll come right back down. And ghrelin will be released, which signals to our body that, hey, I need to eat again because my blood sugar's low and I am hungry. Go ahead, Mel. Thank you, my dear. You can click all of them. Perfect. So glucose and its function. Glucose, aka blood sugar, is the body's cells need glucose for energy, and insulin enables glucose to enter the cell. Insulin is like a key to the insulin receptors in the cell. So I always like to explain it whenever I was doing diabetes education. I would like to say that glucose is your great package, but it cannot come into the cell unless insulin was there to open the door for it. Otherwise, energy would not be able to get to the cell. So with insulin, it triggers them to open and grant entry to the glucose, which again grants your body energy then. Low levels of insulin constantly circulate through our body because we always have low levels of hormones, no matter which way everything trends, we always have low levels of hormones circulating through our body, monitoring for either a spike or a drop in blood sugar. So what a spike in insulin signals to the liver, because a lot of our extra, what Mallory was talking about before, the glycogen, a lot of extra glycogen is stored in our liver. Um, Signals to the liver that a person's blood glucose level is also high, causing the liver to absorb glucose and change it into glycogen. When blood sugar levels drop low, glucagon instructs the liver to convert the glycogen back to glucose, causing the person's blood sugar levels to return to normal. So it's a whole process of, if you ever did biochem, it's gluconeogenesis and all these other things, systems that are really, really fun to memorize. You good now? Beautiful. So macronutrients and glucose. So like Mal said, carbohydrates are the only source where glucose comes from, but not all carbohydrates are created equal. Carbohydrates are found in most food items. So carbohydrates are found in your dairy, your fruit, your vegetables, your nuts, your seeds, your grains, like your rice-based products. Pretty much anything that's not a straight protein and a fat source, and even some fat sources have some carbs in them as well. So avocado does have some carbohydrates, your nuts, your seeds, everything like that. Pretty much your meats, your oils are pretty much the only thing that does not have carbohydrates in them. Fat and protein do not directly impact glucose, but they do impact the rate of absorption if paired with carbohydrates. So eating them by themselves will not cause a glucose spike, but you want to make sure we're always pairing them because that does impact glucose. So this is what blood sugar does. Like I said, how we were wanting to blood sugar spikes. This is what like I said, after the muffin or the bagel, whenever you had it grab and go on the road, and then you realized you were hungry an hour and a half later, that's because your blood sugar increased and then came down very quickly because there are certain objects and certain other things that help balance our blood sugar out. So Protein and carbs together are great, and that will help keep that blood sugar level nice and stable. It slows the rate of absorption of the carbohydrate. If you have a high fiber source of carbohydrates, which we'll talk about complex carbohydrates versus simple carbohydrates in a second, or if you have a fat source. So think about it this way. So we never want to eat carbs alone. Carbs are great. We love carbs. Mallory was saying that, but we don't want to eat carbs alone. So we want to always pair our carbs with a friend. So apple and banana, have it with some peanut butter, have a piece of toast, but maybe throw some turkey on it. All those kind of things, which we'll talk about. All right, so carbohydrates. So there's two big factors of carbohydrates. So you got simple carbohydrates and you got complex carbohydrates. Simple carbohydrates are going to be things that are very rapidly absorbed into our bloodstream, which again, great pre-workout. So for simple carbohydrates, you're thinking candy, soda, white bread, pretzels, chips, some cereals, your more sugary cereals like your Frosty Flakes, those kind of things. White pasta, fruit juices, sweets, sugary breakfast cereals, like we said, syrups, white rice. So these things are easily digested. Keep in mind, if you ever heard of the brat diet whenever you have a stomach bug, a lot of these are going to be here. They're going to be your simple carbohydrates that are easily digested. They don't take a lot of effort for your body to break down. They are going to be rapidly absorbed by the body. They're going to be more processed foods theoretically. And they're good to consume pre-exercise, like we talked about. I am a candy pre-exercise person because I like the extra sugar. And then or with a lean protein source and a fat source, or with like a healthy fat and a protein source. So your complex carbohydrates are mostly going to have your more fiber, which is going to even out your blood sugar. So your oats, your whole wheat breads, your fresh fruits, aka like your whole fruits. It can be fresh, frozen, canned, whatever you want, kind of those kind of things. Your fresh vegetables, your quinoa, your popcorn. Be careful on the popcorn because usually they add a lot of other stuff to them, but technically there is some fiber in popcorn. Your beans and other lentils, whole grains, whole wheat pasta, squash, and sweet potatoes. So these are going to be harder to digest because they digest more slowly because there's fiber in them. Typically, they're going to be from your less processed foods, more nutrient dense. There's a lot of B vitamins in these. And we like to obviously make most of our carbohydrates, these complex carbohydrates. So let's do how to build your plate. This is my favorite thing, and this is when my clients are in a bind. This is what I always tell them to go back to. So we have Thanksgiving coming up in a lovely week and a half. So how to build your Thanksgiving plate, or if you are out of town for several like days and you're like, how am I going to do this? So one, the plate method is going to be one of my favorites. So if you're looking at your plate, your goal is to make half your plate fruits and vegetables, quarter of your plate you're going to be your protein, and then a quarter of your plate either going to be your more starchy carbohydrate. Ideally, we want a complex carbohydrate, but there's also room for simple carbohydrates in the plate method as well. Or some other stuff if you're looking at your plate. Some questions I like to ask. How can I add fiber? That list of complex carbohydrates that we just listed before, those are all really awesome fiber sources. How can I add fiber to my plate? How can I add protein to my plate? Can I add a Greek yogurt? Can I add cheese? Can I add some lean meat? Can I add overall maybe a higher protein cereal option? Can I add eggs, egg whites, tuna, any of those kind of things? How can I add color to my plate? We are very focused sometimes on hitting numbers, but micronutrients are also extremely important. Color, aka your fruit and your vegetable. Do I have a fruit and a vegetable on my plate? One of my favorite stats I ever learned was the group that eats the most fruits and vegetables of all the age ranges is age 2 to 5, because usually it's required by the daycare subsidizing agencies is you're required to serve fruits and vegetables. So our children consume more fruits and vegetables than adults do. And then do I have all macronutrients present, like I listed before? Is there carbs? Is there fat? Is there protein? And we have some really awesome freebies that we'll send out at the end too that gives you really great idea sources of each carbs, fats, and proteins as well. So, other ways to improve blood sugar regulation, because it's not just blood sugar is not a super simple in and out kind of thing. One of the things I like to do is I know I get on a lot of my clients initially this is one of the first things we always work on, especially if they're not breakfast eaters. We need to be eating every 3 to 4 hours. That is our natural blood sugar flow. We need to be eating every 3 to 4 hours. We ideally be needing to have a breakfast within an hour or so of waking, or a small snack. I don't know about y'all's houses. I'm a mom. The first hour in the morning is absolute chaos, but still trying to get something in first thing when we wake up and then every 3 to 4 hours after. Not eating carbs naked, like I talked about before. We love a piece of fruit. Have some protein with it, have some nuts with it, have some turkey with it, whatever it may be. Movement for 10 minutes after eating. That really helps with digestion. So even if it's just standing up, taking a walk around the office, going for post Thanksgiving, if y'all are in a great neighborhood, go for a walk post Thanksgiving dinner. Managing stress. Stress has an insane impact on blood glucose. So stress management is key. And then also getting enough sleep. Not getting enough sleep increases ghrelin, which is that hunger hormone, if you remember. So you're more hungry when you don't have sleep. So that blood sugar continues to dip lower and lower when you don't have enough sleep. So getting enough sleep plus good quality sleep is huge for blood sugar regulation as well. You're muted, my dear.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Megan, for that. And as she mentioned, and I'll talk about it in here when I finish, but we will have a freebie going out to help dive a little bit more into understanding like good choices when it comes to actually picking proteins, fats, carbs, et cetera, to build your plate. Lastly, we're going to wrap up with talking a little bit about the metabolism, the elusive magical metabolism, because this is, I think, like been a very trendy thing. People feel like, oh, my metabolism is broken, it's slow. And really, if you just understand how it works, I think this is the biggest aha moment to anything when it comes to body composition, knowing like what's going on, what to change to get to where you want to be. So let's understand, how does it actually work? The way I want you to understand how metabolism works is I first want to talk about how a thermostat works, a thermostat in your house, okay? A thermostat works on a negative feedback loop, okay? I shouldn't have clicked that, but basically what's happening is you're deciding, oh, I want my house to be 68 degrees, which is the correct answer, by the way. But you set it at 68 degrees and it surveys, okay, well, where are we at now? It's at 70. What do I need to do to get it down to 68? We're going to turn on the air conditioning. And once it cools it down to 68, the thermostat reads, oh, we're at 68 now, I can turn off. That's a negative feedback loop. That's basically what's going on when it comes to your metabolism, okay? Why did I say that? All your metabolism wants to do is keep you alive. So what's happening is, and do what you're demanding of it. So that includes like what you're doing on a daily basis, your activity, etc. So it's going to look for ways to meet you at the set point you put it at. And let's think of your set point as the calories that you're basically intaking, right? And you're setting it at. So let's go back to that 1,200 calories that I talked about at the beginning that I think a lot of us default to. What's happening when you start intaking 1,200 calories on a daily basis is after a few days, your body's like, oh, shoot, she's only giving me 1,200 calories now. Like I was used to getting a lot more than this. I was expending a lot more energy and just like you obviously probably felt a little bit more energetic. Like your brain was able to function more, digestion was good, etc. And now we're all of a sudden in this great calorie deficit and your body's like, what can I do to keep doing all the things I was doing before and really just honestly keep you alive at this amount? I need to turn things down in order to meet that to be the set point. So what starts to happen is you start to waste away muscle. Muscle is very metabolically expensive. So your body's going to start to burn muscle off. This is also why you might see digestion slow down when you're in a big calorie deficit because digestion takes energy and it's like, we don't got the energy to do this anymore. You probably won't talk with your hands as much. I remember when I was competing for bodybuilding, as you can see, I'm a big hand talker. And that all turned off when I was in my deep calorie deficit. Like I just naturally, it just didn't come. Like I'm not thinking about talking with my hands. It just happens. But even those what's the word I'm looking for? Just like things you're not doing or I guess the automatic things like start to turn off because you don't have the energy for it. And anyway, this is eventually why people hit a plateau because your set point that you're setting it at eventually becomes your maintenance. Your body's figuring out how to turn down to that, right? So like I said, I just kind of went through all of this, but how does it do that? It burns off muscle, you get more tired so that you have less energy to expend and you're not wasting that like calories that you're giving it. Brain fog, if you've ever, been in this chronic calorie deficit, you might have experienced some brain fog and felt like that slowed down, slows digestion. And I was going to ask if anybody else has any other symptoms they've noticed when they've eaten low calorie that they think might be attributed, if you can see, like in ways that your body is slowing it down. Anything I didn't name? Anyone else got? It's okay. I'll put it on the spot. Oh, we got some in the chats. I always forget about the chat. Yeah, dizziness. Yes, losing period. That's a huge one. That takes a lot of energy. And also your body's like, I don't feel safe to get pregnant, bring a child in because I'm not getting enough. So you'll see that go down. Bloating, that's a product of digestion slowing down. Irritability, 100%, because you don't have the energy, like mentally, it's a lot of that brain fog. Yeah, all of these things for sure. I think the digestion one's interesting because a lot of people assume like if they're not eating as much, like they wouldn't have as much digestive issues, but your motility is slowing down and you're also just not getting fiber because you're not eating as much. Yeah, a lot of things there. Okay, so now that we kind of understand that, this is why chronic dieting, being in an extreme calorie deficit long term and always kind of being dieting is not good long term. And I wanted to show two relatable life examples that some of you may relate to or just I think paint a picture. So the first being Ozempic, as this has been very popular. This is not to say that Ozempic cannot be helpful. I think for some people it really, really can be, but I think understanding what's actually happening so that you avoid the potential negativity of gaining all the way back because of this kind of phenomenon. So what's happening here is that Ozempic, it's a GLP-1, it mimics the hormone of GLP-1 that signals to your brain that you're full. So now you're feeling full, you don't eat as much. Okay, great, you eat less calories, but over time, your metabolism slows down because you've set it to a lower point because you're just not eating as much. And now your maintenance calories are lower. Well, now when people they get to their goal weight or they don't want to take it anymore, they come off of it and they just kind of go back to normal. Their appetite comes back, or they're like, great, I got to my goal weight, so I can just kind of go back to eating the way I want. The new amount that they're eating again, like their normal, is now a large surplus compared to where their metabolism is now. And so this is why you'll see a lot of weight regained and even often more because they've not only like are they again going back to those maybe negative habits, but they've also lowered their metabolism lower than it was prior by going through this. Another prime example is we're coming up on the holidays here and why people feel like they might gain 5 pounds, 10 pounds in a matter of a few weeks over the holidays is because if you're going through the entire year restrictively dieting and slowing down your metabolism, because again, same thing, you're always eating at a low point, your metabolism's lower. When you come to this holiday time where you're finally like, I think a lot of people go into that mentality of it's my one chance, it's my one time, I'm just gonna cheat, I'm gonna go off, I'm gonna let myself indulge. And they usually do it in a large amount because again it's that all or nothing mindset often happens here too. You have no metabolic flexibility because your metabolism is so much lower and slow, so these excess calories, it's a big surplus, and you easily go into the surplus and you feel like you're always gaining that 5 to 10 pounds over on the holidays. And so I hope that paints a little bit of a picture of, again, if we're always eating at a low amount, what can happen. Now, how do we change that? Okay, because I think that's going to be a question. It's, well, great. Okay, I see how it got downregulated. That sucks. How do I turn it back up? Good news is you can. I do want to preface that. The same way that you set it to a low place and adapts down to that, you can set it to a higher place and adapt it up. This is the phenomenon of basically reverse dieting. But some things that can help rev it up is number one, building lean muscle. Muscle takes a lot of energy, burns a lot of calories, and the more muscle that you have on your body, the more calories you are just going to burn as a human. That's what we call your basal metabolic rate. That's basically the base amount of calories you burn just existing. If you were to just literally lay in bed, open your eyes, do nothing else the entire 24 hours of the day, and then close your eyes, you still would be burning. For most people, it's around like 1,200 to 1,400 calories, which, side tangent, that's why we need more than 1,200 calories because you're doing a hell of a lot more than just laying in bed with your eyes open. But the more muscle you have, the higher, somebody with more muscle is going to be more at that 13, 14, 1,500 just baseline rate. So it makes you a furnace, calorie burning furnace. Another way is to slowly bring up your calories. Again, this is the phenomenon of reverse dieting. If you do it at a very slow pace and especially compounded with strength training, your body's going to increase to meet to that higher set point. The same way we just talked about how it can decrease. So everybody like gets, bummed that metabolism downregulates, but we can upregulate it too. So that's the good news. And then the last way is to eat more protein. As I talked about back in the macro section, protein has the highest thermic effect of food, which just means you burn the most calories digesting it. So eat more protein, your metabolism's faster, and it also helps with building muscle. So it comes back to this one and all the things that come with that. And I just wanted to use myself as an example here, and what really understanding these foundations of nutrition changed for me. Because on the left here, this was back when I was trapped in that 1,200 calorie kind of thought process too. And that was what I was doing Monday through Thursday. And then weekends and definitely holidays would set me back 10 steps because I had no metabolic flexibility. It was downregulated. I felt like then I would have that 1 or 2 cheat days and it would just go way back over because even like 500 calories extra was a lot. Like if I was eating 1200 and then 2000 is very easy to do. 2500 is very easy to do when you go have a burger and an ice cream shake. And that's 1300 over what my maintenance was, right? So I had no metabolic flexibility. But once I changed a lot of these things and worked on strength training and upgrading my metabolism and reverse dieting, I was able to eat over 2000 calories a day. I got my basal metabolic rate up. And then when the holidays came, when weekends came, and maybe I had 2200, 23, I ate a little extra. It's not as much extra, right? It doesn't make as much of a difference. So that's what having a much more of a resilient metabolism and lots of room for life kind of means and looks like. That is it. Thank you guys so much for coming. Keep an eye out tomorrow for an email that's going to have the recording of this if you want to go back, and also a free nutrition blueprint survival guide. That's kind of the freebie me and Megan have been talking about. That's going to have really good information and lists of great options for proteins, carbs, fats, meal ideas, ways to combine them, etc. Stay on for a little bit because I am going to be picking the winner of the 1 month of free coaching from somebody who's here. But before we get to that, I want to open the floor for any questions that you guys have.
And feel free to drop them in the chat.
Yeah, if you can't talk as well, definitely.
Explanation.
What was that? Somebody asked something. I don't see anybody not on mute, so I don't know where that came from. All right, chat, we got one. Oh, there are ones in the chat. Okay, and I also want to say, so we do have Coach Nicole, Coach Jess, I think Coach Nick is on here too. And so feel free, any of y'all, to chime in on answering these as well. But first question, how can you know if your metabolism is slow? I would say, I mean, for this, if you feel like you are gaining weight on an amount of calories that really you shouldn't be gaining weight on, you can use, like, obviously, like, a lot of calorie calculators online are going to give you different results, but it's honestly an okay place to start to kind of get an idea of maybe based on where your height, weight, activity level, your maintenance calories should be. And if you go do those and you feel like, wow, if I were to eat that, I'd gain weight. Or every time you're trying to kind of maybe diet and you go into what you think is a relatively adequate calorie deficit, like it's not too low, but you're not seeing any change, that would probably mean our metabolism's a little bit slower. Because if we have to dig and dig and dig and really get to this very low place, a place to where you're feeling like if you have to drop your calories so low that you're feeling this brain fog, you're feeling hair loss, you're feeling bloating, a lot of these symptoms we talked about, that's too low. And if we have to go that low, like we're probably in a negative spot metabolically. Megan, is there anything you want to add to that?
And I say that as a caveat where if you are doing it 7 days a week and you feel like you're there, a lot of us are notorious, and a lot of my clients that I've worked with are notorious for being in a calorie deficit 4 days a week and then in a surplus on the weekends. So I want to always tell people look at their weekends first and how closely are your weekends actually reflecting your weekdays. But Mifflin St. Jeor and Harris Benedict are the two equations that you can go and get a really good baseline of what calorie roughly should be. Like so fun fact about me, I used to work in a clinical setting. If you were on a vent in the hospital, that would be what I would be calculating for you, if you were not doing anything else. So those would be a really good baselines just to start and be like, hey, let me see if I track 7 days a week of what I'm doing and seeing how we're hitting that. And if it's like, okay, we're gaining a lot of weight doing that, then we probably want to talk about maybe scaling back calories and going up slowly doing a reverse diet.
Yeah, it is a good caveat to add because I think reverse dieting and like it's been a trendy and my metabolism still has been a very trendy thing, but oftentimes like people, it's just we're not being super honest and accurate of like what's going on the weekends. But there are many people, and I mean I was one of them, where like if you're so consistent 6 to 7 days a week in an adequate like calorie amount and you're not seeing change, like we're probably a little bit down regulated. Also, if you don't have a lot of muscle mass, like you're gonna have a slower metabolism. If you've dieted, like chronically dieted for a lot of your life, it's probably a little bit downregulated. How do we know how many calories we need? There's a lot of different ways to kind of figure this out. Again, like using a calculator online, using those equations can be helpful to give you kind of a starting point. Just to give you an idea, I would take the average of a few of them. And then Honestly, the real answer here is good. There's going to just be trial and error. I would track, and that doesn't mean you have to track forever and track perfectly, but track a little bit loosely for like a couple weeks and see how you feel. Did you gain weight? Did you lose weight? And kind of play around with it until you get to a point where you're maintaining. And that's going to at least be need is a tough question too, because are you asking, do I need for building muscle? Do I need for maintaining? Do I need for losing fat? Like those are all going to be different answers. And that's something I also think to understand about nutrition is there's no, even for each individual person, there's no, these are your macros and what you should always be eating forever and ever and ever. Like they're going to change based on what your goal is. Or maybe you're somebody who're like, I feel good and I just want to maintain. Still, as you get older, as different things change, as you're maybe like on your cycle or you're trying to get pregnant or like though it's going, your needs are going to change. So it is an ever evolving thing. But I definitely think like utilizing a calculator, working with somebody, or just getting like a good understanding for yourself of what your daily habits look like and how you feel and what's going on body composition wise and tweaking from there, is a good approach.
There's also a really great trend on TikTok right now. I don't know if anyone's on the side of TikTok that it's like what I ate in a day when I was 40 pounds heavier. And even just the kind of the mental realization of certain foods that are higher calories is sometimes really good too, just because a lot of people don't realize how many calories are in certain foods, especially if you're a frequent eater outer, which again, I also love. I eat out probably 3 times a week. So again, I'm not demonizing eating out by anything like that, but there are higher calories that come with certain foods. And I think overall, just being mindful and tracking just so you know what you're eating is also a really great thing as well too.
100%. Megan, this will be for you. What do you recommend adding to a plate when craving chocolate and needing protein and fiber?
Oh, this is great because I'm a chocolate queen. So number one, when it comes to chocolate, if you can do dark chocolate, I recommend at least 70% cocoa dark chocolate. I love dark chocolate. So for me, that's like one of my go-tos. So if we can do dark chocolate, it has a little bit more antioxidants in it. It has a little bit more magnesium in it. So that's always good. If we're doing regular chocolate too, I'm totally fine with it. But I love making a kind of like a parfait with either like some dark chocolate chips and some strawberries and a Greek yogurt. For me, that is very fun and it's very filling. And but then also kind of helps my sweet tooth, especially if you throw the yogurt in the freezer for a little bit and then it's like becomes froyo and that's really great. Also, there's some really great like frozen yogurts like two right now that you could add some fruit to and then throw your chocolate on as well.
Yeah,
That
I
would
like
be what I
that.
would.
Yeah, my go-to snack lately has been Greek yogurt. You can mix in protein powder, specifically the Legion plant-based protein. It mixes in so good. You could get a chocolate flavor. And then yeah, add some chocolate chips, add some fruit. That's gonna be your fiber. The Greek yogurt's your protein. That's a perfect balanced meal that kind of hits the sweet tooth as well. All right. With all the information you find online with diets and fasting, what do you recommend for someone wanting to lose weight but wanting to keep muscle? So this lose weight and keep muscle, great question. Lose weight and build muscle, those can sometimes be that can be difficult to do at the same time. Not impossible, but difficult for most because losing weight requires typically a calorie deficit. Building muscle requires typically at least maintenance, if not a slight surplus. But losing weight and wanting to keep muscle, the best recommendation I can make here is number one, strength train alongside of your calorie deficit and eat high protein alongside of your calorie deficit. Because again, this goes back to that macros versus calories, right? Being in a calorie deficit, that's going to be what helps with the weight loss. But then honing in on what's going on macronutrient within those calories is going to be what helps with the type of weight loss. So the more protein you still have, protein sends a muscle sparing signal to your body and says, hey, 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 keep this muscle, don't burn it off. Like we need it. The other thing that also sends that muscle sparing signal is strength training and literally using the muscle and telling your body it's needed. If you don't use the muscle and there's no reason for the body to keep it, it's the first thing it's going to want to get rid
Burn
of.
it all. That's
Yeah,
my thing today.
exactly. It's the first thing the body's gonna get rid of. So high protein, strength train. Um, if it's late at night and you haven't met your calorie or protein goal, is it better to still eat even though it's late, or should you just not hit those goals for the day? I'd say this depends on like how far away you are. I mean, if it's a little bit, if it's like,
200 calories.
Yeah.
Try.
Yeah. If it's, yeah, then, but if it's like, I mean, I would say the biggest, most important thing here is probably the protein. Like, I'd rather you hit the protein goal, and if you can't get the calories in or fats in, that's fine. The protein is the biggest thing, again, to anything we're probably trying to accomplish body composition wise, keeping muscle if we're in a deficit, building muscle if we're not. But one thing I would also just add here, like if this is a once in a while thing, like it's fine if it's a day. If this is something you find yourself kind of constantly doing, there may be a mental component of kind of macro hoarding, as we call it, calorie hoarding, where it's this just kind of subconscious or conscious thought of, I still want to have things left. I don't want to go over my calories. And so you try to make very small meals throughout the day. You try to skimp where you can. And I did this myself when you still are coming from more of that like dieting mindset. And then you get to the end of the day and you still have so much left. So really trying to break that kind of mindset, make more balanced meals, if you find this happening a lot. Best way to track. Should we be measuring our food on a food scale? I mean, yeah, the best way to track is using an app. MyFitnessPal is very user friendly. I know Megan really likes what do you call it?
Chronometer.
Chronometer.
A
It shows
chronometer.
more of the micronutrients. And then measuring on a food scale is going to absolutely be the most accurate way. I think a lot of people think it's very time consuming. It's honestly much easier and cleaner than using tablespoons and cups. It's the same thing. It gets such a negative rap. It's so funny, but like it's normal to freaking measure things with cups, but it's the same thing on a food scale. You just don't have to clean a dish, so it's great. Now if you can't, like, if you're out to eat, can't bring a food scale everywhere, it's fine. Eyeball it, guesstimate. Putting things in guesstimating is better than just acting like it didn't happen, right? So that'd be my
I like
recommendation.
the hand portion. You can look it up too. You can Google it. It's called the hand portion guide, and that's really, really helpful when you're like, especially if you're like a beginner eyeballer. The hand portions are really, really helpful when it goes, okay, like palm size is about like 3 ounces of protein. Thumb is like a tablespoon. Like those kind of things can be really, really helpful as well too if you're just beginning eyeballing.
Yeah. Any recommendations slash things to be aware of when binge eating, especially if you don't feel full? Megan, I'm gonna let you feel this one.
So one, a couple things physiologically that I like to kind of talk about is number one, how low are our calories earlier in the week? Is our activity increasingly high this week? Um, Two, are we not necessarily calorie hoarding, but were we planning out our meals and maybe we didn't plan and time meals great throughout the day? Obviously, is there any other emotional triggers going on, anything like that? Because from someone who has struggled with binge eating, like it can turn into a bottomless pit and your mind's just like completely shut off from it. Number two, what else are we eating wise? Are we eating your high fiber foods? Are we hitting our protein goals? Do we need to increase our protein? Because sometimes that can help too. Um, any of those kind of things can be really, really beneficial. And maybe if you're someone who's been in a calorie deficit for a hot second, maybe that it's time for a diet break and bringing you back up to maintenance for a hot second. Or maybe you've been in a diet for a long time and maybe it's time for a reverse and doing a full, pretty much backhaul of increasing calories to get back up to maintenance again, too.
Okay, lovely. And then before we get to our whoever is our free winner of the free month, one thing I did just want to announce and give you guys early access to is we do have our Black Friday special coming up here in a couple weeks. But we do have limited spots because we only have our 5 coaches and we're teetering always kind of on their full rosters. So wanted to give you guys early access before those do fill up. What the Black Friday special is going to be is up to 2 months of free coaching. So you can see below, I won't read them all, but an additional free month with any of our coaching packages. So if you do want to apply for the special, there's no, like, you're not locked in if you do it in terms of like you have to commit. If you're just interested in hearing more about coaching and seeing if it would be a good fit, feel free to either DM me, or you can apply through the link that will go out in the emails, or you can just respond to the emails. Call me, beat me, we'll arrange me, I'll get you. But we'll just set up a call and we'll chat and see if it's a good fit and it's something we want to do. But wanted to give you guys that early access. And then just kind of show some of our client progress pickers who, again, they seem same concepts that we talked about, while it's just scratching the surface and there's so much more that goes into fitness, nutrition, all of that. These are the same things that we've used with these clients who have made some really phenomenal changes. All right, guys, that is everything. I had another question slide. I think actually there was one more questions in the.
Yeah. Natalie said, can you explain a diet break? So a diet break is exactly what it sounds like. So I do this with a lot of my clients who have a little bit more work they want to do during a cut. So for me personally, and every coach is different, but for me personally, I don't cut anyone longer than a 16-week period. We are only in a calorie deficit for a 16-week period because after a 16-week period, that's when we start to see metabolic damage that is more long lasting. So to kind of help prevent that is a diet break is bringing like almost immediately bringing back someone up to maintenance and chilling there for like 2 to 4 weeks, depending on how we're feeling, and then hopping back into a second round of a cut. So typically I like to do that for clients who, hey, we want to see if we can push a little bit more, a little bit further. We have a couple more pounds we want to lose before we do a full reverse. So I'll diet break clients then.
Sweet. Okay. Any other questions? Going once, going twice. Okay. Or drop your name in the chat if you have not yet. I will screenshot
Oh
all of
gosh, there's one more question. Oh gosh.
Keep going.
So we can keep going. So repair. So part of the thing, so best practice, and people hate to hear this, best practice of a pretty much reverse maintenance phase is for the duration you are dieting. And for many women, this is years. But minimally, if someone's coming to me in really, really poor metabolic shape and we're working through reverse, minimally I keep someone at maintenance for 8+ weeks, depending on what kind of situation we're dealing with. If it's bad, I've had reverse people for a year plus before because they were just in that bad of a situation where everything was not working well and everything like that. So that is typically minimally, depending on metabolic state. We're talking usually 8 weeks. So then you'll be able to see results again. Otherwise, sometimes it's even longer. And sometimes we think we might have done it long enough and try to cut, and your body says, no, I know what you're doing. Ha ha ha. I'm not going to do anything. And then we need to stay at maintenance a little bit longer. And that's just sometimes where we are. And unfortunately, especially women who grew up in the early 2000s, we have done a number to ourselves over our teens and 20s and 30s. So that's one of those things where I like to kind of keep in mind of whenever I'm working with clients personally.
100%. Okay. Anything else? We got a couple more minutes.
Thanks everyone for coming.
Anyone have a topic off the top of their head even now that they're like, I would love to hear another masterclass on that? Start planning our future ones. And if you don't have one now, think about it. So again, you'll be getting the email tomorrow with the recording and the freebie. And any of the responses there will come to me. Okay, so reverse dieting, training during injuries. Amazing. Okay, cool. And they don't know it yet, but I will be there on here. But I think we'll switch off on also other coaches being able to come in and help with these because everybody's got their own expertise. So
A lot of
um,
weight training ones.
yeah. Okay, we'll get some. All right, Jess, Nicole, I feel like that's your wheelhouse.
I was like, just the goal. Y'all are up.
How to be a beginner. Okay, these are great ideas. Yeah, feel free to keep emailing them as they come. But thank you guys so much for coming. And if you have any questions, even just from this topic that comes to you after the fact, feel free to DM me as always. Or again, DMs are always open. And I hope to see you guys at future ones. Everyone have a great night. Bye.